This is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, retold at the intermediate level. Chapter 6. Mr. Darcy's Letter. The following morning, Elizabeth woke up with a terrible headache. She was still very shocked and confused about Mr. Darcy's proposal. She decided to go out for a walk in the countryside to clear her head. She walked for a long way and was beginning to feel much better when suddenly she saw a man on the road. It was Mr. Darcy. He called her name. Elizabeth stopped. Mr. Darcy was holding a letter. "Please read this letter," he said. Elizabeth took the letter. Mr. Darcy bowed, then walked quickly away. Elizabeth opened it. "Dear Miss Bennet, do not be afraid. This is not another proposal of marriage. You must read this letter. You are angry about Mr. Bingley and your sister. You are also angry about Mr. Wickham. I have some things to say about both. First of all, I would like to explain about Mr. Bingley. When I was in Netherfield, I realized that Mr. Bingley liked your sister very much. On the evening of the Netherfield ball, I saw that Charles was in love with your sister. While you and I were dancing, Sir William Lucas spoke to us. He said that Charles Bingley and your sister were going to get married. Everyone obviously thought this. I watched your sister for the rest of the evening. She smiled a lot, she was open, and she was happy. But I saw no evidence that she was in love with Charles. You said yesterday that she was very unhappy. I'm sorry about this. Perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps she was in love with Charles. However, there are other reasons why a marriage between your sister and Charles Bingley would be a bad idea. Your family status is not very high, although your father is a gentleman. This would not be a problem if your mother and your younger sisters behaved better. You and your older sister are different. I'm sorry to offend you, but this is true. When Charles went to London on business, I decided to follow him. I decided to make him stay in London for the winter. His sisters agreed with me. They didn't want him to marry your sister. We talked to him about your sister. We explained that she was not in love with him. Bingley is a modest man. He trusted our advice. I am not sorry about this. I believe I was right. There is one thing that I am less happy about. I didn't tell Charles that your sister was in London. Perhaps that was a mistake. I knew, and his sisters knew, but we decided not to tell him. However, I am not sorry about anything else. I acted for very good reasons. Secondly, you say that I am the reason that Mr. Wickham is poor. I don't want to tell you, but I have no choice. I must tell you the whole story about Mr. Wickham and my family. Mr. Wickham is the son of a very good man who was the manager of my family's estate at Pemberley. My father was very fond of George Wickham, and he helped him very much. George Wickham's father was very poor, so my father paid for the boy to go to school and then to Cambridge University. My father hoped that George would become a clergyman. I knew that George Wickham was not a good man. He behaved badly at Cambridge. My father never saw this, and I never told him. Just before my father died, about 5 years ago, he asked me to give Mr. Wickham a church on the Pemberley estate. I agreed. 6 months later, Mr. Wickham wrote to me. He said he had no intention of becoming a clergyman. He asked me to give him some money instead of the family church. He intended to study law. I was happy to pay him some money because I thought Mr. Wickham would be a bad clergyman. I paid him £3,000. There was no reason for any more contact between us. I didn't like him. He didn't like me. 3 years later, he wrote to me again. He said he had changed his mind and wanted to become a clergyman after all. He asked me to give him the church on the Pemberley estate. I said no. There was no reason for him to contact me again. Last summer, however, he did a terrible thing. I don't want to tell anyone this, but I trust you to keep my family's secret. My sister Georgina was 15 years old. She left school last year and moved to London. Her housekeeper and companion was called Mrs. Young. Georgina and Mrs. Young went to the seaside in the summer, and Mr. Wickham met them there. Mr. Wickham paid Georgina a lot of attention. She thought she was in love with him. She agreed to marry Mr. Wickham in secret. She was only 15. Fortunately, I went to the seaside to visit them, 2 days before they planned to run away together. My sister told me the whole story. I didn't want the story to become public, so I wrote to Mr. Wickham. He left immediately. Mr. Wickham wanted to marry my sister for her money. Miss Bennet, this is the true story of my family's connection with Mr. Wickham. Please believe everything I have said in this letter. Colonel Fitzwilliam knows the truth, if you want to ask him. God bless you. Fitzwilliam Darcy. When Elizabeth started reading the letter, she felt a strong sense of prejudice. Mr. Darcy had no reason to send her a letter. He couldn't say anything important to her. She was still angry when she finished Mr. Darcy's comments about Jane. Then she started to read about Mr. Wickham. This must be false, she thought. Then she thought more carefully. All the information she had about Mr. Wickham and Mr. Darcy had come from Mr. Wickham. It was true. Mr. Wickham was very charming, and everybody liked him, but nobody really knew anything about him. Now Mr. Wickham wanted to marry Miss King for money. Elizabeth had made a mistake. Mr. Wickham was not a good man. She had been prejudiced. She thought again about the first part of Mr. Darcy's letter. Everything was true. Jane didn't show her feelings. Mrs. Bennet was embarrassing, and Kitty and Lydia behaved badly. Elizabeth walked around the countryside for 2 hours and then went home. Mrs. Collins told her that Mr. Darcy and Colonel Fitzwilliam had been to visit. They had come to say goodbye because they were returning to London. Elizabeth was happy that they were going away. All she could think about was the letter. It was soon time for Elizabeth to return home to Longbourn. She enjoyed her last dinner at Rosings. Lady Catherine was as rude as usual. Elizabeth looked at Lady Catherine and thought to herself, "Your nephew has asked me to marry him. You could be my aunt." She laughed at the idea. Elizabeth now had mixed feelings about Mr. Darcy. She was angry with herself, and she was angry with her family. Mr. Darcy was right. Elizabeth and Maria Lucas left Hunsford to spend a few days in London with the Gardiners before going home with Jane. Elizabeth decided to say nothing to Jane until they arrived home at Longbourn. The journey back to Meryton was very long. When they arrived, Kitty and Lydia had come to meet them in the village. They chatted about life in Meryton. They had 2 important pieces of news. They were sad because the militia were leaving. They were going to Brighton for the summer. They were happy because Miss King had left Meryton. "Wickham is safe," said Lydia happily. "Perhaps Miss King is safe," replied Elizabeth sharply. Mrs. Bennet was very happy to see Jane, as beautiful as ever, back in Longbourn. Mr. Bennet was very happy to see Elizabeth back. Elizabeth was happy to be home, but worried about meeting Mr. Wickham again. The next morning, Elizabeth told Jane about Mr. Darcy's proposal. Jane was surprised, but pleased that Mr. Darcy liked her sister. The two sisters also talked about Mr. Wickham. They decided not to tell anyone in the village about Mr. Wickham's true character, especially because the militia were leaving Meryton. Elizabeth didn't tell Jane about Mr. Bingley because she didn't want Jane to be upset. While Jane and Elizabeth were talking, they could hear Lydia chatting excitedly to their mother. Lydia had just received an invitation from the militia colonel's wife to go to Brighton with her. Mrs. Forster was very young and had just married Colonel Forster. The colonel thought it would be a very good idea for his wife to have a young companion. Elizabeth was worried. She decided to speak to her father. "I don't think Lydia should go to Brighton. She's too young. She behaves very badly. I've heard other people talk about how badly she behaves," she said to Mr. Bennet. "Yes, Lizzie," replied her father, "but Lydia is a very silly girl. She won't be happy unless she goes to Brighton." "But, father, she's vain, lazy, and ignorant. Going to Brighton will make her worse." "Don't worry, Lizzie. That will mean that people will like you and Jane more. They will see the difference between you and your silly younger sisters." Mr. Bennet had decided. Lydia was going to Brighton. On the militia's last day in Meryton, Elizabeth saw Mr. Wickham again. He asked Elizabeth about her time at Hunsford. She answered that she had seen Mr. Darcy and his cousin, Colonel Fitzwilliam, at Rosings. "How long were they at Rosings?" asked Mr. Wickham. "About 3 weeks." "Did you see them often?" "Almost every day." "Colonel Fitzwilliam is a gentleman, unlike his cousin." "Oh, I think Mr. Darcy is nicer when you get to know him," said Elizabeth. Mr. Wickham looked surprised. "Perhaps he is happy about the marriage to Miss de Bourgh," he said. "Perhaps," replied Elizabeth. She smiled to herself.